Hello and welcome to another episode of Belgian Diecast Restorations. My name is Johan and this time I have another twin restoration for you. We are looking at the British Matchbox 27D Mercedes 230 SL and the German Siku v229 Mercedes 230 SL. Although I couldn't find any reliable info on the scale, both models are exactly the same size. The very common Matchbox Mercedes was produced between 1966 and 1969, while the Siku Mercedes was produced from 1967 up to 1974. Since the German toy brand Siku started making diecast models after Matchbox gained access to the German market, we can assume that Siku produced this car when Matchbox released their 230 SL Mercedes in Germany. Anyway, Siku clearly wanted to outclass the Matchbox model, with the addition of jeweled headlights, clear red taillights and a suspension which has a lot in common with the Majorette suspension system. Both models are very play-worn. The Matchbox is missing its tow hook and the Siku car is missing its steering wheel. The most important missing part is of course the windscreen, that's broken off on both models. I have a bunch of spare windscreen for the Matchbox Mercedes, and since the cars are the same scale, I'll try if I can fit the Matchbox windscreen on the Siku Mercedes. My aim is to do a close to faithful restoration, giving the cars their original paint jobs back. The red interior of the Matchbox Mercedes is actually very accurate. However, I'm not a big fan of the fluorescent orange interior in the Siku car, so this will be painted black. The models are both held with 2 rivets in the base. The Siku car has some very peculiar brass rivets. They actually are small brass tubes with the rims bent over to fix the bottom plate. I carefully drilled them out until the base is ready to come off. Now I can remove the interiors, the remains of the windows and the doors. I use a safety pin to pry out the jeweled headlights. They are just held in place and easily come out. The Siku wheels just pop out of the axles with a bit of force. The Matchbox wheels are still in good shape but worn. I detached the wheels from the axles by grinding away the axle ends. The axles of both cars, as well as the suspension rods of the Siku Mercedes, go into the household vinegar to remove the rust. Here are the spare windows for the Matchbox 27D Mercedes. I'll leave a link for the parts in the description. As I suspected, the shape and size of the windows fit both cars perfectly. I was hoping to get away by drilling 2 holes in the base plate of the window to fit the window on the pegs of the Siku car. Although they do fit, the casting of the Siku car is a little thicker than the Matchbox car and the window sits slightly lower. This calls for my second plan, which is to glue the Matchbox window on top of the remaining base of the Siku window. I sand the remaining base of the window in the Siku car flush, then I cut off the base of the spare Matchbox window and sand away the rough edges. Finally, I glue the Matchbox window on the base. As the super glue sets, I source a steering wheel for the Siku Mercedes and glue it in place. More gluing is needed for the tow hook of the Matchbox Mercedes. I cut off a small piece of polystyrene rod and glue it on the spot of the missing tow hook. After the glue has dried, I sand the end until the hook is more or less rounded. Then I paint the tow hook with a metallic enamel paint just to let it blend in with the rear bumper. The wheels of the Matchbox car are painted with heavily tinted Tamiya X1 gloss black to give them back their shine. Now it's time to strip the paint. I put the metal bodies and the doors in a jar of boiling water and add 2 tablespoons of caustic soda. The paint dissolves almost immediately. I think we can agree that both models came out with almost 100% paint removal, just some bluish flecks left on the inside of the Siku model. I airbrush the castings and doors to remove any last flecks of paint and dirt. Those brass rivets on the Siku Mercedes are just 1.5mm wide and they're very thin. If I would try to tap those, they will crack. So no screws for the Siku car, but I don't think this will pose much of a problem. For the Matchbox Mercedes, I drill a pilot hole in the rivet post using a 1.5mm drill and some masking tape to mark the depth of the screws on the drill. Then I tap 2mm screw threads and do a test fit. I use isopropyl alcohol to remove any grease or dirt from the castings. Now we can start painting. The Matchbox car body and the doors are primed with Vallejo grey hobby paint used as a primer. The Siku car body and doors get a white primer from AK Interactive. The interior of the Siku Mercedes gets a black primer from the same brand. Once the primer has dried, the Matchbox body is sprayed with 2 coats of Tamiya TS7 Racing White. This is a great color for old race cars and ambulances, but it doesn't always provide good coverage. The car will get a 3rd coat the next day, as the primer was still visible through the paint on some spots. For the Siku model, I airbrushed 2 coats of Vallejo Sky Blue, which is virtually an exact match, only slightly darker. The interior of the Siku Mercedes then gets a coat of Motip High Gloss Black. The Siku Mercedes is clear coated with AK Interactive Gloss Varnish. The Matchbox Mercedes is coated with Motip 1K Automotive Gloss Varnish. The interior of the Siku Mercedes gets a matte clear coat on top of the gloss paint, which results in a realistic satin finish. I also polished the bottom plate containing the grille and headlights of the Matchbox Mercedes. The Siku bottom plate is still very shiny and just needed a bit of a clean. The axles and suspension rods came out of the vinegar looking very clean. They just needed a wire brush polish to make them shiny again. Now it's time to put the cars back together. First the Siku Mercedes. The Siku wheels just pop back on the axles. Then come the jeweled headlights. Attach a newly made windscreen, the doors and the interior. The taillights go on the bottom plate, then come the suspension rods, which are held in place by two gaps in the bottom plate. I had two small nails ready to glue into the brass rivets, but the rivets snap tightly into the holes and won't be going anywhere soon. And lastly, the Matchbox Mercedes. The Matchbox wheels are reattached to their axles using a small hammer to form a new mushroom head on the axle ends. Make sure to keep the axles firmly pressed against the base. The windscreen snaps over the rivet, then the doors just slide in and the interior holds everything in place. Sorry if I'm going out of frame, sometimes I forget the camera trying to concentrate. Finally, everything is closed up with the two screws. Those are two very smart looking Mercedeses, and you can really see the difference between those two same scale models of the same era from different brands and countries. This was a very interesting restoration, and it's good to know that the Matchbox 27D windscreen will fit the Siku Mercedes, as there are no third-party parts for the Siku V series available. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy my videos, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and tick that notification bell. More restorations are coming up. See you in the next video.